The town may be kind of small, but these folks have big smiles and big hearts, and they know what it is to have simple fun down our way, where old-fashioned singing and homey gatherings make living mighty pleasant.
Are you tired of talking about Bob?
Is that the question?
That's the question. Are you talking?
Okay.
I wasn't sure either, Mike. I wasn't sure if that was the question.
It sounded more like a statement, so I apologize.
I didn't know if that was like the pre-question question. So I've been filling in the blanks a lot, kind of reflecting on that time with Bob, So to answer your question, no. I mean, other than, an interview like this, it's not like I spend the rest of the day talking about Bob, so.
Dave's rolling.
Welcome to Abandoned Albums, the documentary podcast where we take a closer look at some albums that may have been forgotten about over time, and some albums you may not even know existed. I'm your host, Keith R. Higgins, and sharing mic duties today with me is Rob Janicki.
Hey, Keith, how are you?
You know, Rob, I am just dandy.
Land sakes, that always happens when I got biscuit dough all over my hands. All right, I'm a-coming as soon as I can.
On this episode of Abandoned Albums, we go deep into the folklore of the Replacement's founding guitarist, Bob Stinson. After being unceremoniously kicked out of the band after their major label debut, Tim, Stinson continued his long struggle with drugs and alcohol while drifting in and out of bands in Minneapolis. By 1993, he had found a home in Mike Leonard's band Bleeding Hearts. In June 1993, Spin magazine published an article titled, "Hold My Life, Bob Stinson Regrets." An article that could have helped bring Bleeding Hearts to a national audience, when in reality, it did the exact opposite. Fortunately, the four members, bass player Rob Rebello, drummer Pat McKenna, guitarist Bob Stinson, and lead singer and guitarist Mike Leonard, found their way into the studio to record some music. Over 30 years in the making, the resulting album, Riches to Rags, is a collection of songs that is bare bones, bloody-knuckled rock and roll at its best. Founder Mike Leonard stopped by to talk to us about Riches to Rags and a little bit, actually not a little bit, a whole lot about Bob Stinson. Questions were asked, answers were given, stories were told. Well, thanks for taking the time to join us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
We both have listened to the record. We dig it.
All right.
Very cool. Yeah.
Cool. Are you guys big fans of Replacements or Bob or?
Well, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm a huge Replacements fan. They are my favorite band.
Okay, cool.
Did you get to see the Replacements when you were growing up in the Twin Cities at all?
I did, but I never did see them with Bob in the band.
I didn't either.
The first time I saw him was actually around Pleased to Meet Me era. And they they barely finished a single song the whole night. And they did. I remember they started playing "Gimme Shelter" and everything. They would kind of stop like after like 2 or 3 bars. It was like a classic, like really, really bad Replacement show.
Yeah, that was the tour that I first saw them, was Pleased to Meet Me, and I saw them in Cincinnati, Ohio. And to this day, it is the reason why I wear earplugs to a show, because for 2 days everything kind of sounded like this. It was a great show, and they fucking crushed it, but they were so fucking loud.
Your mouth feels clean, your throat refreshed. The finest leaf tobacco, mild, refreshing menthol, and the world's most thoroughly tested filter. That's Snow Fresh Filter Cool.
How did the Bleeding Hearts come together pre-Bob?
I've been trying to put the timeline together, but Bob joined in probably winter of 91. So we probably had about 1.5 to 2 years before Bob that we were doing different things. Went through several different guitar players. I always wanted it to be a 2-guitar band, even though I was often the lead guitar player. I just always liked having 2 guitars. Yeah, we'd been playing for a while. We did a 3-song demo at Underground Studios, and then around this time I had moved to Uptown and started hanging around at the Uptown bar, and started seeing Bob there often. So I'd kind of struck up, a little bit of a rapport with him, and was trying to, buddy up to him, and so it's like, we had this guitar player that had suddenly quit, and it just kind of struck me like I should get Bob to join the band. It'd be perfect. So that was kind of when I first approached him. Yeah, it was may have been still 1990.
I think it was Bob Mayer's liner notes said he was telling a joke and you interrupted Bob to tell the punchline.
Yeah.
Do you remember the joke?
No, I don't. I mean, I remember I was just walking by him, and it was like, I think it kind of annoyed him in a way. He just kind of did a quick look at me and was like, "Who is this kid?" Initially, we approached him about joining, and he wasn't really into the idea. I mean, we kind of had to coax him into coming down to the practice space with us, and went and picked him up from Williams Peanut Bar, and he was kind of 3 sheets to the wind, and we bring him down to the space, and the whole time we're driving down there and everything, he's like, "You should get Jamie Garner from the Leatherwoods," and we're like, no, we want you, Bob. And we get down there, and we're playing super loud, and it's just noise, and after about 45 minutes we were just like, okay, who is this guy? And he took us straight from the practice space to the Uptown bar to go introduce us to Jamie Garner.
Wow.
And then, so he ended up joining the band for about, 8 months or so. We played with him until then he moved to San Diego. And then I think during that time, Bob saw us a couple times. So I think he actually, he knew Jamie, and, he approached me then later and said, it was his idea to join kind of the second time around.
I recall reading that Bob was your roommate.
Yes. Well, I mean,
given his history,
he's always referred to as roommate, but I consider a roommate someone that you split the rent with, or have some kind of arrangement that's somewhat fair. But yeah, when he came over, and he came over to my apartment to learn all the songs, and we sat down, he learned everything in 45 minutes or less. And and I think it was his idea, right that same night, he's like, "I should move in." And I was like, "Oh, okay." It was funny because the previous guitar player had moved into my apartment as well, and had been sleeping on my couch for the previous 9 months. A month later, then I'm moving him out of his mom's basement onto my couch. It was a 1-bedroom, and so he had the couch in the living room, and he wasn't working at the time, so he wasn't really paying rent. But then, rent was so cheap back then. It wasn't that big a deal, I guess.
Oh, good. I mean, I read that, and I'm like, we all know the history of Bob Stinson. I'm like, he would be the world's worst roommate in my mind, and I've lived with some assholes, In
a way, it kind of I was 21 at the time. I was thinking, well, if Bob stays here, it'll be easier to get him to come to practice, and get him to shows on time and stuff like that. So I mean, that was kind of the thought, at least. And in the first several months, I mean, that kind of was the case. It was we had a lot of good times. But I mean, there
Sure.
there was there were the influences that were kind of pulling him in the wrong direction the whole time too. So
did Bob contribute much musically?
Yeah, I mean, well, let me think. Of the songs on the record, there's probably probably more than half were written prior to Bob joining. But even on those, I mean, he put his stamp on, kind of on everything. Even on songs where I would show him a guitar line to play, note for note. He would play it note for note, but then he would bend up to a note, or he would do something to make it, even cooler, But then, yeah, the songs that I wrote after he joined, there were things he added, guitar parts, little like on Guilty, he came up with that kind of guitar. That's sort of the call response to the vocals and the verses. So yeah, he definitely contributed, and then there were other ways he contributed too. Oddly, that were he would have drum ideas. He would get behind the drums and show Pat. Like at the end of Tonight, there's this little drum fill, or whatever. It's not even really a drum fill, but this little drum part, and Bob was like, "You gotta do this," and you're like, "What?" And then he gets behind the drum, and he's like really awkwardly playing the drums, and he's like, he can't play the drums, and yet he came up with this part, and Pat still plays it to this day. So, and he would come up with like random bass line ideas. So yeah, he definitely had like ideas all over the board. Like not just guitar parts, but
I've heard that about, or read that about Bob, that he had almost like a savant-like quality when it came to music.
Yeah, well, when he was in the right frame of mind, he was I think really quick.
I think it's interesting, Mike, that you had mentioned several, maybe more than half of the songs were written before Bob came in, and that's interesting when musicians do collaborate that way, because you obviously had an idea and a sound and a plan for the record, and it's a great rock and roll record. So he comes in and he puts a stamp on, like you said. Are your influences, or were your influences, yours and Bob's, pretty much the same? When you were talking about the songs that would be on the record that weren't written yet?
Yeah, and it wasn't, when he initially was joining, we weren't even talking about making a record, but I mean, we went for about, I don't know, at least half a year of just going down to the practice space. But yeah, as far as the influence go, I think I wouldn't say we have the same influences, because I was definitely coming from more of a Stones fan than he was. He wasn't a huge Stones fan. It's kind of funny though, because he was a huge Johnny Winter fan.
Right.
But then of course he had the prog rock influence too, being that Steve Howe is kind of his favorite guitar player.
That always struck me as counterintuitive, his love of progressive rock and Steve Howe and the music that came out of him, and that he's known for. It just seems so...
Right. I mean, I was more into Led Zeppelin than Yes, like I think he liked Jimmy Page okay, but he was, definitely all about Steve Howe. It was definitely different.
a man can have a heap of money, and he can be as strong as a team of horses and as smart as one of them there school teachers, but if a woman's got a secret, he'll still feel like the biggest dad-blasted old fool that ever lived.
Where did you record Rags to Riches?
Riches to Rags.
Jesus, don't I feel like an asshole? Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. It gets reversed quite a few times.
Well, it's such a famous saying that when you flip it around, like your brain does go to the first.
Right.
I apologize. Yeah. So where did you record?
At Terrarium Recording Studio. So, which is still a fantastic studio to this day. We recorded at their old location though, so it was a different spot, but a lot of the same gear.
How long were you in the studio then?
Well, we went in March of 2000. Or 2000. March of 1993. Yeah, it was March of 93. We went and did like 8 songs in just like a couple of days. Maybe, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 days. And then shortly after that, we did that show with Bash and Pop, and that's when the Charles Aaron came to town and did the spin article. And that's kind of how we connected with Sunshine and Fiasco Records. She read the spin article, and I believe she called my apartment from the plane where she was reading the article.
There seems to be 2 choices with heroin: addiction or death. Unfortunately, our story involves the latter.
I'm glad you brought up the spin article. How was it framed? I mean, because I got to imagine if I'm you and I've got Bob Stinson in my band, Spin's coming to do a profile of the band. This is going to be great. It's going to open up the doors for us to go national and
right.
That article is not about the band at all.
No.
Was that the way it was positioned to you? It's like, oh, we're going to do a profile on your band, or? Well,
I don't know if it was pitched as a band profile. I mean, I was obviously included in the first round of interviews. It was Charles Aaron interviewed Bob and I at the CC Club. I mean, it was, they definitely didn't show their hand and say we're going to do kind of like a sad story about this washed up former Replacements guitar player. It wasn't pitched as that.
Kudos to them for that.
When we got when we were doing the interview, when I was doing the interview with Bob and Charles Aaron, it was, pretty much all questions steered, kind of about or around the Replacements. And I remember I was kind of trying to downplay it, and I don't know if I would be described as brash or anything, but just kind of, if I was asked, if I was a big Replacements, I would, I was like, not really, whatever. I think I said I wouldn't say I wasn't a fan, but I was trying to tone that down and kind of steer it towards something other than that, right? But, and then of course, when Bob did additional interviews with Charles Aaron while he was here, that's evidently. I didn't find out about this until it, it was published, that, Bob had apparently, asked him for money to go buy heroin or something. And all of that was in the article. Yeah. I remember Bob coming to tell me, break the news to me. And he was kind of a little embarrassed about it, but it's like at the same time, he's like, shouldn't have said all that stuff to him then, Bob, but. When you get this, Bob comes to you and tells you this, I mean, does your stomach fall a little bit, or you just sort of think, oh, fuck? Well, yeah, I mean, it was kind of like a horror show, especially when you get to the last section of it, and it was just like, what? He did what?
The following reenactment is from the article, Hold My Life, Bob Stinson Regrets, from Spin Magazine, June 1993.
Bob ducked under a bridge and slid out onto a section not covered with snow where he could see fish through the ice. I was afraid he was going to slip and fall butt over beer bottles again, like he had earlier in the day on the sidewalk in front of his apartment. But he kept his balance, excitedly pointing toward a group of men seated in lawn chairs up ahead.
Do you know what they're doing?
I nodded.
Aw, man, I love ice fishing.
Then, just as quickly as the fish darted under the ice, Bob's mind switched subjects.
Have you ever done heroin?
Before I could answer, he continued.
Ever use a needle?
I shook my head no.
You can get some really good, cheap stuff around here. I don't really do it, but if you wanted to, we could get some and do it, later if you wanted.
He almost sounded like he was asking me out on a date. And I didn't want to say no, because this was the first real gesture of, well, I don't know, trust or friendship or something that Bob had extended. When I finally said no, I knew he felt like I was judging him.
He had oddly done a few interviews around that time where, talking openly about whatever, heroin and coke and stuff that even people that normally do, use don't usually talk about, right? And he was just being so open about it, and I was like, Bob, what are you doing? And then the pictures they used for Spin were pretty bad. I mean, especially like the super close up under the direct sunlight. Yeah. The most annoying thing about it was Charles Aaron came to Minneapolis to, we were playing the entry with Bash and Pop. I think it was sold out. I mean, it would have been more embarrassing if we were playing in front of like 8 people, and it was crickets and he sees us like having a horrible night. But I mean, it was like a sold out show, and everyone felt good about it. It was
wow.
I suppose I grabbed the gun from under the pillow where I keep it. He tried to take it away from me. And next I knew there was a shot and he was mumbling something about a doctor. Oh, now leave me alone. Leave me alone.
So you guys presumably went back into the studio, is that right?
In August of 93 to record 5 more songs and kind of finish final touches on the previous batch and then mix, and everything. So it was 2 sessions. I would say it was definitely under a week for sure.
Congratulations on finally getting the record out. Where has it been, Mike?
Well, the master tapes have been in my possession for probably 10 years. Like Sunshine gave them to me a while back. I think when she was moving or something. But yeah, it's also been mastered, and it was mastered to a CD and ready to be pressed back in 94 or 95. So mainly in limbo, I guess. It's kind of funny that I've, after all these years, to kind of be putting the red or the Bleeding Hearts hat back on again. It's like, because I'm, some of that stuff I look back on, it's kind of sort of foreign to me, like that songwriting, like Imagination or something, that the really Stonesy ones, it's like, it's cool, but I mean, it's like,
you're not in your 20s anymore.
I'm not that same kid.
Yeah.
It's a great record.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad it exceeded your low expectations from the skin.
Well,
I say that just jokingly, but
it's really great rock and roll, and I'm glad it's coming out.
Oh, thank you. I remember Bob kind of commenting when we were listening to some of those playbacks in the studio. He's like, "We sound like Richards and Wood."
That's not bad. Not from where I sit.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Some of Bob's guitar playing on it is pretty straight ahead rock and roll on there. There's a few good, great Bob moments. It's funny because we've been playing playing these songs again, and some of these solos I'm trying to figure out what Bob did, and almost every time there's like a weird, it has a weird sound to it. It's because he's kind of starting the lick in like the wrong position. He's playing the wrong scale, and then he bends it to make it sound right at the end or something.
That's funny.
So I've been studying some of those Bobisms lately. It's kind of fun.
Bobisms.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's great.
That's awesome. Let's step away from Bob for a sec. The other guys in the band, another Bob Herbers, and Rob Rebello.
Pat McKenna is the drummer on the record. You're not the first person that has said that. It keeps coming up as Bob Herbers. I'm like, it is Pat McKenna who's the drummer on the record and the drummer now. And Bob Herbers actually quit the band shortly after Bob joined.
Is it just me, or is this band? I think your band has the most Bobs, Robs, Roberts in the history of music.
I know, and my middle name is Robert too. So I think it was Bob Herbers, Rob Rebello, Bob Stinson, and then me. And so we were all of us had Robert.
I think this is probably kind of a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Are you going to tour? Will there be any shows behind this record?
So far, we're playing a show on Record Store Day at the Minneapolis Eagles Club.
Okay.
So we're definitely doing that. It's me, Pat, and Rob Rebello.
Awesome.
The three, and John Freeman is playing rhythm guitar again. So. And we started, the three of us started getting together, I don't know, like at least half a year ago. We figured we might do something once we knew the record was coming out. So that's been in the works for a while. I don't think a full-on tour is in the works right now, but we have been playing, so we're not ruling anything out.
Have you guys looked at, playing? I know you've got the show booked for Record Store Day, but would there be a consideration for shows, like even if it was regional or say a couple of the big cities around the country, just to get some dates in? Is that a possibility?
We'd love to.
Don't you think it's time we got started getting ready for, you know what? Let's get off in the kitchen.
The article comes out. What happens to the band afterwards?
That was probably spring of...
I think it was summer of 93. I think if I'm looking, I remember reading it just again today. June of 93?
Okay. Well, so that would be like a couple of months before we did the second session at Terrarium. But somewhere around that time, in the summer, the conflicts between Bob and I had came to a head. We'd gotten into a few fisticuffs. I think before that second session, he moved out of my apartment. And that was sort of like the beginning of the end, because he kind of moved over to someone else's couch that was kind of heading in the wrong direction, so to speak. And that just made it like, it was like, obviously before cell phones, and I don't even know if I had a phone number for him, or if we had to try to. It made getting a hold of him really hard. I'm pretty sure that the second session we had trouble tracking him down and getting him to the studio, and that kind of created a little extra stress. And I think we actually cut some of those songs as a 3-piece and had to overdub Bob on a couple of them. I mean, the first session had gone like so smooth, like Bob was really pretty sober, throughout the whole thing, and was really into it. And like those 8 songs are all basically recorded with just live bass, drums, and 2 guitars. Only a couple of overdubs. I mean, the vocals were all overdubbed, of course, but the guitar solos, everything are live. So, it went really, really smooth, and the second session where we did the 5 songs, it was like getting Bob there was hard enough. And then once we did get him there, he was like, not always in the best shape to contribute. And, so a little bit more of a rocky road for that second, but we did get it done though. And I think we were happy with the whole thing.
Right. You got a lot to be proud of, Mike. Bleeding Hearts, Riches to Rags is a great, great record. If you like bare bones stripped rock and roll, I don't think you can do any better right now. So a tip of the hat to you, sir. And thanks for stopping by and having a chat with us.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, this was great, Mike. It was a great conversation. Really appreciate the time and the stories. It's awesome.
All right. Been a pleasure.
All right, man.
Okay.
Right.
Take care, you guys.
Take care, Mike.
See you, man. All right.
All right. Bye.
The songs you heard today were all taken from the Bleeding Hearts album, Riches to Rags. And they were
Guilty, 100 Ways, and Imagination. Bleeding Hearts, Riches to Rags is available to stream wherever you stream your favorite music. Many thanks to Mike Leonard and Bar None Records. Abandoned Albums was recorded at Thunder Love Studios.
Produced and written by Keith R. Higgins and Rob Janicki.
Engineered and mixed by Steve Beasley. Edited by A.J. Royce.
Original music by Mike Pellegrino.
Land sakes, that always happens when I got biscuit dough all over my hands.
If you like what you've heard, be sure to subscribe and follow us on social media. At Twitter, we are at Abandoned Albums, and on Instagram, we are at Abandoned_albums.
As always, thanks to Rob Janicki, S.W. Loudon, Nathan Sage, Steve Beasley, Mike Pellegrino, Therina Bella, and of course, our executive producer, Rufus Thunderlove.
And now, until we meet again next time, I remain as always obediently yours.